Tittle the Sleeping Mountain of Dragons and the Awakening of the Hero. In a faraway kingdom, nestled between vast forests and rolling hills, there was a mountain unlike any other. It was known as the Sleeping Mountain of Dragons. The mountain was shrouded in mist, its towering peaks obscured from the eyes of men, and within its depths, ancient dragons slumbered, waiting for the day they would awaken. Long ago, a prophecy was written, one that foretold the rise of a hero who would awaken the dragons from their deep, eternal slumber. The prophecy spoke of a time when the world would face its greatest darkness, and only the dragon's power could restore balance. Many had heard the legend, but none dared approach the mountain. Its dangers were well known, and only those with true courage could survive its trials. The people of the kingdom had almost forgotten about the prophecy, until one fateful night. A young boy named Eric, who lived on the outskirts of the kingdom, had always been drawn to stories of the ancient dragons. Though he had heard the legends countless times, a stirring in his heart told him that he was destined for something greater. It was on a quiet evening, under a sky filled with stars, that Eric had a dream. In his dream, he saw the sleeping mountain bathed in an eerie glow. From the depths of the mountain, eyes of fire opened, and a voice boomed, "The time has come. The hero will awaken." Eric awoke with a start, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew, without a doubt, that the dream was not merely a dream. It was a calling. The prophecy was true, and he was the one chosen. Eric knew that his path would not be easy. He packed what little he owned, a simple sword passed down from his father, a cloak to shield him from the elements, and a pouch of provisions. His village, though humble, had always been a place of warmth, but now it felt distant. The world outside was calling him. As he made his way toward the sleeping mountain, Eric encountered travelers and sages who spoke of the dangers that lay ahead. "The mountain is cursed," they warned. "None who enter have ever returned." But Eric's resolve did not waver. He was determined, not for glory, but for the chance to fulfill the prophecy. The journey was arduous. Days turned into weeks, and the path grew more treacherous with each step. The weather was unforgiving, and the forest, dense with ancient trees, seemed alive with whispers. At night, the shadows danced around him, and strange creatures moved through the underbrush, but Eric pressed on. At last, Eric stood before the sleeping mountain. Its peak was hidden within the clouds, and the air was thick with the weight of centuries. The entrance to the mountain was guarded by a great stone door, inscribed with runes that glowed faintly in the moonlight. As Eric approached, the door opened slowly, revealing a vast cavern inside. The air was cool, and the scent of ancient earth filled his nostrils. As he ventured deeper, he encountered the first of many trials, the trial of fire. The cavern before him suddenly erupted in flames, and the heat was unbearable. Eric's heart raced, but he remembered the teachings of his father. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. With steady hands and a focused mind, Eric found a path through the flames, narrowly avoiding their searing heat. The second trial, the trial of shadows, was even more terrifying. A deep darkness filled the cavern, and Eric could hear the sounds of creatures lurking just out of sight. But he did not falter. He drew upon the courage he had gained in the face of the flames and pressed forward, his sword glowing faintly with an inner light. The final trial was the most challenging, the trial of the heart. Deep within the mountain, Eric encountered an ancient dragon, its eyes glowing with wisdom and age. The dragon did not speak, but Eric felt its presence in his soul. The dragon tested his resolve, asking him to confront his deepest fears and doubts. Eric stood tall, facing the dragon, and spoke the truth that had been in his heart all along. "I do not seek power for myself, but for the good of the world." I am willing to sacrifice all to protect those I love. The dragon's eyes softened, and it lowered its mighty head. In that moment, Eric felt a surge of energy unlike anything he had ever experienced. The mountain trembled, and the air around him crackled with ancient magic. The dragons, who had slumbered for eons, began to awaken. Eric's heart swelled with a newfound strength. The power of the dragons flowed through him, and with it came the knowledge that he had been chosen not just to awaken the dragons, but to lead them in the battle against the darkness that threatened the world. The mountain shook as the dragons stretched their wings, and the skies above were filled with their roars. Eric stood at the heart of it all, no longer just a boy, but a hero, a protector of the realm. With the dragons at his side, Eric returned to his kingdom, where the people had long awaited the prophecy's fulfillment. The dark forces that had once threatened the land were no match for the power of the awakened dragons, and peace was restored. But Eric knew that his journey was not over. He had awakened the dragons, but he had also awakened something within himself, a sense of duty, of purpose, and of the enduring power of courage. And as the sun set over the sleeping mountain, Eric looked up to the skies. Knowing that the dragons would always be there, watching over the world, ready to awaken whenever they were needed again. As Eric returned to the kingdom, the air was thick with anticipation. The people had heard the legends, and many had given up hope that the prophecy would ever come to pass. Yet, here was Eric, not only alive but standing as a beacon of hope, with the mighty dragons flying above. The once quiet village where Eric had grown up now buzzed with life. Word of the hero's return spread quickly, and travelers from distant lands came to witness the dragons that had awoken. The people of the kingdom, who had lived in fear of darkness and war for so long, were filled with awe and wonder. Eric did not immediately seek fame. Instead, he turned his attention to the kingdom's needs. His first order of business was to help rebuild the villages and towns that had been ravaged by the long years of strife. He called upon the dragons to help clear the land of blight and restore the natural balance that had once flourished. The dragons, with their immense power, were gentle in their aid. They breathed fire to clear dead trees and overgrown thickets, and their wings stirred the winds that carried away the dark clouds that had gathered over the kingdom for centuries. The fields grew green again, rivers flowed with clarity, and the sun's warmth returned to the land. The kingdom began to heal, and Eric's actions spoke louder than words. He had never been motivated by the desire for glory, but by the duty to protect and nurture the world around him. As the seasons changed, so too did the hearts of the people. With the dragons now part of the world once more, their ancient wisdom was sought by those who ruled the land. Eric called a meeting with the oldest of the dragons, a creature named Vorel, whose scales shimmered like silver in the moonlight. Vorel, though ancient, was wise beyond measure, and his deep voice resonated with the power of the ages. Eric, Vorel began, his voice echoing through the chambers where the council had gathered, you have fulfilled the prophecy. But you must know, the dragons are not mere instruments of power or guardians of balance. The world will change now, and you must be prepared to guide both men and dragons in this new era. Eric bowed his head respectfully. I understand, but how do I begin? How do we ensure that the darkness does not return? Vorel's eyes glowed with a knowing light. The darkness will always seek to return, in one form or another. It is the nature of things. But with balance, and with vigilance, you can keep it at bay. The dragons will not be your soldiers, Eric. We are your allies, your guides. It is you who must lead with wisdom and compassion. The Council of Dragons spoke at length, discussing the future of the kingdom and the role of each dragon in maintaining peace. Eric listened, absorbing every word. He understood now that being a hero was not simply about wielding power, it was about leading with humility, patience, and a steady heart. Time passed, and Eric's reign began to take shape. The kingdom, once fractured, became united under his leadership. He formed alliances with neighboring realms, ensuring that peace would endure. He established councils made up of both humans and dragons, to make decisions that would affect the land as a whole. But peace is fragile, and not all were content with the changes. There were those who sought to challenge Eric's authority, believing that the dragons, with their immense power, should rule over the world. They whispered in the shadows, planning to undermine the new order. One fateful day, a group of rebels led by a power-hungry sorcerer known as Kale attacked the heart of the kingdom, seeking to seize control of the dragons. They believed that with the dragons under their command, they could reign supreme. Eric, with his unwavering determination, gathered the dragons and the people who had stood by him. The battle that followed was fierce, but it was not one of mindless destruction. Eric, remembering the wisdom he had gained from the dragons, sought not to destroy but to protect. He did not strike down his enemies, but rather he sought to reach the heart of their conflict. In a moment of clarity, Eric approached Kale, standing firm as the sorcerer unleashed his dark magic. "This war is not the way," Eric said, his voice calm yet firm. "Power can only lead to destruction. Only by working together can we find true strength." Kale paused, his eyes flickering with doubt. Eric's words had struck a chord, but the sorcerer's pride and ambition were not easily quelled. Yet, in that moment, the dragons stepped forward, their eyes gleaming with ancient wisdom. They did not attack, but their presence alone was enough to silence the conflict. With the support of the dragons and the people, Kale was brought to justice. Eric did not seek vengeance, for he knew that the key to peace was understanding, not force. As the years passed, Eric's leadership grew stronger, and the kingdom flourished. The dragons, once feared and misunderstood, were now seen as protectors and teachers. They taught the people the ancient ways of the earth, the sky, and the sea. They shared their wisdom in art, philosophy, and science. Eric, though now a legend in his own right, never stopped being the humble boy who had once dreamt of awakening the dragons. He knew that his true strength lay not in his title, but in the unity he had fostered between the dragons and the people. One evening, as Eric stood on the balcony of his castle, watching the dragons soar gracefully above the kingdom, Vorel approached him. "You have done well, Eric," Vorel said. "The world is no longer in the darkness it once was. But remember, the journey never truly ends. The balance must always be maintained, and it is in your hands to protect it." Eric nodded, his heart filled with peace. "I will. And so long as I draw breath, I will ensure that the dragons and the people live in harmony." As the sun set behind the mountains, the shadows grew long, but Eric knew that, with the dragons by his side, there would always be light. The sleeping mountain of dragons no longer stood as a place of mystery and fear. It had become a symbol of hope and strength, a reminder of the power that lay within unity. Eric's name would live on in the songs of bards and the tales told by generations to come. And the dragons, the mighty creatures who had once slumbered for centuries, now soared high above the world, guarding it from the shadows, ensuring that the balance Eric had fought for would remain. Though peace had settled over the kingdom, and the dragons were now revered as protectors, the balance that Eric had worked so hard to establish was not without its challenges. Beneath the surface of the kingdom's tranquility, a new and unseen threat began to stir that neither Eric nor the dragons had anticipated. A faction of dark sorcerers, who had remained hidden during the great battle against Kale, began to gather in secret. Their leader, a mysterious figure known only as the Void Caller, was a master of ancient, forbidden magics. It was said that he could manipulate the shadows themselves, calling forth creatures from beyond the mortal realm. The void caller, once a student of the ancient dragon sages, had been cast out long ago for seeking forbidden knowledge. His thirst for power was insatiable, and he believed that the dragons, with their immense power, were the key to his ultimate ascension. He had learned to harness dark magic that could influence even the minds of dragons, twisting their ancient wisdom into something unrecognizable. Eric sensed that something was amiss. Though the dragons had been a source of peace and prosperity, he knew the world was not yet safe from those who sought to corrupt their power. It was with a heavy heart that he called for a council with the dragon elders. One evening, as the first stars appeared in the sky, Eric made his way to the heart of the kingdom, where the oldest and wisest of the dragons resided. Vorel, now a towering figure of silver scales, stood at the entrance of the dragon's lair, his eyes reflecting centuries of knowledge. "Eric," Vorel said, his voice deep and resonant, "you have done much to bring peace to this land, but you must understand that peace is fragile. There are those who will always seek to tear it apart." Eric nodded, his face grim. "I feel it, too. The Void Caller has returned, and with him comes a power far darker than any we have faced before. The dragons themselves may be in danger." Vorel looked to the stars, his ancient gaze filled with sorrow. "We have sensed his presence, but his magic is subtle. It twists the hearts of those who are not vigilant, and even the mightiest dragons are not immune to such influence." Eric stood in silence for a long while, the weight of responsibility pressing upon him. What must be done? Vorel's eyes gleamed with a hidden strength. The Void Caller's reach is vast, and his power grows each day. We cannot face him alone. The time has come to unite not just dragons and humans, but all the creatures of the world. The balance we seek must be one of unity, not division. You must seek allies from beyond the borders of your kingdom, from the wild lands, the seas, and the ancient forests. Eric's journey took him far from the kingdom he had once known, as he sought to rally the forces of the natural world. The dragons, though powerful, were only a part of the equation. He needed the wisdom of the ancient forest spirits, the strength of the mountain guardians, and the magic of the deep waters. Each journey led him to new realms and new challenges. In the great forest to the east, he met with the ancient spirits of the trees, who spoke in whispers carried by the wind. The forest had stood for millennia, and its roots intertwined with the earth itself. The spirits, though reluctant to leave their sanctuary, agreed to lend their aid. Their knowledge of the land and the hidden forces of nature would be invaluable in the coming battle. To the north, Eric sought the mountain guardians, beings of stone and fire who lived deep within the heart of the world's tallest peaks. They were beings of ancient power, born from the very elements of the earth. At first, they were suspicious of Eric, but after he proved his sincerity and courage, they agreed to join the alliance. Their strength would bolster the army that Eric was building. Finally, Eric journeyed to the seas, where he met with the mysterious water mages who had long kept to themselves. These mages had the ability to control the tides and summon storms. Though they had kept away from the affairs of the land, they knew that the balance between land and sea was at risk. In the end, they, too, agreed to lend their magic to the cause. Eric had gathered a vast and powerful alliance, and the time had come to face the Void Caller. The armies of darkness had grown stronger, their magic tainting the minds of both men and dragons. The forces of good, united under Eric's leadership, marched toward the shadowed fortress where the Void Caller had made his lair. The battle that followed was one for the ages, a clash between light and shadow. The dragons fought fiercely alongside the guardians of the earth, the spirits of the forest, and the mages of the sea. Eric, at the forefront of the battle, wielded the Sword of Light, a gift from the dragons forged from the purest magic. The void caller, cloaked in darkness, stood at the heart of his fortress, summoning terrible beasts from the abyss. His power was formidable, and the forces of light struggled against his dark magic. But Eric, bolstered by the unity of his allies, pressed on, his determination unwavering. In the final confrontation, Eric faced the void caller in the deepest chamber of the fortress. The sorcerer laughed, his voice echoing like thunder. "You are too late, Eric," he sneered. "The dragons are mine, and with their power, I will become a god." But Eric's resolve was unshakable. "You cannot control what was never meant to be controlled," he said, raising the sword of light high. With a single, decisive strike, Eric shattered the void caller's dark magic. The sorcerer's form crumbled to dust, his reign of terror ending in an instant. The dark creatures that had been summoned fell into oblivion, and the world breathed a sigh of relief. With the defeat of the void caller, the world was once again at peace. Eric's legend grew even greater, but he remained humble, never seeking praise. The kingdoms of men and dragons stood united, and the forces of nature continued to work in harmony. As the years passed, Eric's name became synonymous with courage, wisdom, and the power of unity. His legacy was not in the battles he fought, but in the alliances he forged and the balance he restored. The sleeping mountain of dragons, once a place of mystery and fear, had become a symbol of hope and renewal. And as the dragons continued to soar high above, they carried with them the memory of the hero who had awakened them on the world. The years following the defeat of the void caller were marked by a period of unparalleled peace and prosperity in the kingdom. Under Eric's guidance, and with the dragons now living in harmony with the people, the land flourished. Cities grew, villages thrived, and the bond between humans and dragons deepened. Eric, now a wise and respected ruler, no longer had to fight battles. Instead, he focused on fostering growth and development. He established schools to teach both humans and dragons, ensuring that the knowledge of the ancient times was passed on to future generations. The teachings of balance and unity, once fragmented, were now central to the culture of the kingdom. As the seasons changed, Eric took it upon himself to visit the outermost villages and meet with the people. He understood that true leadership was not about command, it was about connection. His visits were always welcomed with joy, for the people had not forgotten the sacrifices made to bring peace. They had witnessed firsthand the transformation of their world and the unity that Eric had championed. In these travels, Eric would often reflect on his journey. The boy who had once dreamed of awakening dragons was now the ruler of a united kingdom, standing at the forefront of a new age. He had always believed that the power of unity would triumph, but seeing the real-world results of that belief filled him with awe. One evening, as Eric sat beneath the great oak tree at the center of the royal gardens, Vorel approached him. The great dragon's silver scales shimmered in the fading light, and his eyes, though filled with the wisdom of ages, held a certain warmth. "Eric," Vorel said, his voice filled with reverence, "there is something we, the dragons, wish to offer you. You have restored balance to this world, but there is a gift we can give you, one that will ensure your place in the legacy of this kingdom." Eric looked up at the dragon, curiosity in his eyes. "A gift? But I have no need for riches or titles, Vorel. I've already been given more than I could have ever dreamed." Vorel smiled, his gaze softening. "This is not a gift of gold or power. It is a gift of wisdom, and a bond that transcends time itself." With that, Vorel extended one of his mighty wings, and from the tips of his claws, a small crystal, glowing with an ethereal light, was placed in Eric's hand. The crystal shimmered like the stars in the night sky, casting a soft glow around them. "This crystal," Vorel explained, is a conduit of the ancient wisdom of the dragons. It will connect you to the heart of the dragons, and through it, you will be able to call upon our guidance whenever it is needed. But more importantly, it will ensure that you remain in balance with the world, for as long as you live. Eric held the crystal in his hand, feeling its power pulse through him. He understood the weight of the gift. It was not a tool of domination, but a means of connection, of understanding the deep currents of the world, both the light and the shadow. "Thank you, Vorel," Eric said quietly, his voice filled with gratitude. "I will carry this responsibility with honor." Though Eric had achieved so much, he knew that peace was not a state that could be taken for granted. As the kingdom continued to prosper, he watched over it with a watchful eye. He had come to understand that while the dragons were powerful allies, it was the will of the people that would ultimately sustain peace. Eric also realized that the dragons were not eternal in the way the ancient sages had once believed. Their kind, though long-lived, was not immortal. And as the centuries passed, they would slowly fade from the world, leaving behind their legacy. It was up to the people to ensure that the unity between humans and dragons endured. With this understanding, Eric made the difficult decision to pass on his role as the primary leader of the kingdom. He had accomplished much, and though his heart remained with the people, he knew that the kingdom would thrive best under new leadership. He called together the Council of Dragons and the representatives of the human realm to form a new system of governance, a system built on collaboration, where dragons and humans shared the responsibility of guiding the world. Eric appointed a new leader, a wise and compassionate woman named Alara, who had grown alongside him during the years of peace. Alara was a natural leader, possessing the qualities of fairness, empathy, and strength. She had earned the trust of both the people and the dragons, and under her guidance, the kingdom would continue to prosper. Eric, with the crystal in hand, took a step back from the throne. His work was done, and the future was in good hands. But he would remain a quiet advisor to Alara, offering his wisdom when needed, and ensuring that the bond between dragons and humans remained unbroken. Many years later, long after Eric had passed from the world, his legacy endured. The kingdom continued to thrive, and the dragons, though fewer in number, remained protectors of the land. The knowledge of unity and balance was passed on to every generation, and the bond between man and dragon became a central pillar of the kingdom's identity. The sleeping mountain of dragons, now a sacred place, was visited by pilgrims from all corners of the world. They came to honor the memory of the hero who had awakened the dragons and forged an unbreakable bond between their kind and humanity. The crystal that Eric had received from Vorel was passed down through the ages, and its glow continued to shine brightly. A reminder of the wisdom and power that once shaped the kingdom. And so, the story of Eric and the dragons became legenda tale whispered in the wind, carried on the wings of dragons. A story of unity, of balance, and of the enduring power of a hero who had awakened the world. As the years passed, the kingdom flourished under Alara's wise rule. The dragons, though now fewer in number, remained close to the people. The bond between humanity and dragonkind had become a foundation upon which the future was built. However, not all was without challenges. The legacy of Eric's awakening still cast a long shadow, and with it came a new generation, children who were born with the potential to carry on the harmony that Eric had established. These children, known as the Children of Unity, possessed a unique gift, the ability to communicate with dragons in ways that no one else could. The Children of Unity were trained by the wise sages, who had served Eric and Alara, learning both the magic of the land and the ancient knowledge of the dragons. They grew up with a deep understanding of the importance of balance, and their role in maintaining the peace was vital. It was their responsibility to ensure that the lessons of unity and cooperation were passed on to the next generations. As the children of unity matured, some began to question if their calling was to simply uphold the peace or to explore new possibilities. Many felt a deep yearning to see what lay beyond the boundaries of their kingdom, to discover unknown lands, and to encounter new civilizations. They often looked to the sleeping mountain, where the dragons had once been awoken, and wondered if there were other secrets hidden within the world's secrets that could further enrich the harmony Eric had created. The time had come for the first of the children of unity, a young woman named Leora, to embark on a journey of her own. Her heart was filled with the same courage that Eric had once carried, and her eyes sparkled with the same wonder that had guided him. Leora's departure from the kingdom was met with both excitement and trepidation. She was the first of the children of unity to journey beyond the known borders, seeking the unknown lands that lay beyond the mountains and oceans. With a group of trusted companions, including a young dragon named Sereth, Leora set off on her adventure. Sereth, a descendant of Vorel himself, was a skilled communicator, capable of understanding not just the language of dragons, but the very rhythms of the earth and wind. His presence was both a blessing and a reminder of the connection between all things. Their journey took them across vast plains, through forgotten deserts, and over towering mountains. They encountered other creatures, beasts with strange and wondrous powers, communities who had lived without contact with the kingdom for centuries, and ancient ruins that whispered of times long past. As they traveled, Leora began to sense that the world was not as harmonious as she had once believed. There were still remnants of discord, forces that longed to upset the peace Eric had worked so hard to establish. In the distant lands, she encountered a mysterious cult that sought to revive the power of the Voidcaller. This dark faction believed that the balance Eric had achieved had stifled their own ambitions. They sought to bring back the ancient, destructive magic that had once threatened the kingdom. But Leora, with Sereth at her side, was determined to stop them. The children of unity had been trained in the ways of balance, and Leora knew that her purpose was to ensure that the world remained in harmony. She sought not to destroy, but to heal, restoring the broken pieces of the world that had been forgotten. As Leora's journey unfolded, she began to unravel the mysteries of the forgotten lands and the remnants of the Voidcaller's influence. She discovered that there were ancient places, lost to time, where dragons had once roamed freely, places where their power was still strong. In one such land, deep within an untouched valley, Leora encountered a hidden dragon sanctuary. Its walls inscribed with symbols that had long been lost to the people. It was here that she met an elder dragon, Araylin, whose scales shimmered like the stars themselves. Araylin was one of the last of the ancient dragons who had not joined Eric's alliance. He had chosen to remain in isolation, safeguarding the secrets of the dragons from the world. Araylin revealed to Leora a forgotten truth: the dragons had not been the only guardians of balance. There were other ancient beings, elemental forces that existed beyond the known world. The dragons, while powerful, were only part of the great tapestry of existence. And the time had come for the dragons to step forward once more, not to dominate the world, but to guide it into a new era. Eric's legacy, Araylin explained, was not just about the union of man and dragon, it was about the awakening of all the world's forgotten guardians. The time had come for a new alliance to form, one that would bring together not only humans and dragons, but all creatures of the earth, the seas, and the skies. Leora returned to the kingdom, bringing with her a message of hope and renewal. The dragons had not gone into hiding forever, they had simply been waiting for the right time to emerge. The world needed them once again, not just as protectors, but as guides to help humanity navigate the complex future that lay ahead. Eric's teachings had been passed down through the ages, but now it was time for the next chapter. With the knowledge that there were even greater forces at play in the world, Leora and the children of Unity began to reach out to the other forgotten guardians beings of the earth. The sea and the air awakening them to their purpose once again. The world was on the verge of a new era, one where unity would no longer just be a dream, but a reality woven into the fabric of the earth itself. As Leora stood on the shores of the kingdom, watching the first rays of dawn rise over the horizon, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She was the bridge between past and future, the one who would lead the world into an age of even greater harmony. And thus, the legend of Eric, the hero who had awakened the dragons, became not just a tale of the past, but a living story, a story that would continue for generations to come. As Leora's new alliance grew stronger, there were whispers in the corners of the kingdom. While peace had reigned for decades, it was clear that not everyone was content with the direction the world was heading. Old factions that had once been in favor of the Voidcaller's destructive ways began to stir again. Rumors spread that the remnants of the Voidcaller's cult had been gathering in the hidden reaches of the land, searching for artifacts of power that had been lost to time. They had learned of the ancient forces that Aurelin and Leora had discovered, the elemental guardian sand. They were determined to use them to reshape the world to their will. In the dark corners of forgotten forests, underground caverns, and remote mountain ranges, the cult's members convened in secret. They had discovered that the crystal gifted to Eric by Vorel, which had helped maintain the harmony between humans and dragons, held more than just the wisdom of the ancient dragons. It held the key to unlocking the power of the Voidcaller's magic once more. Leora sensed the growing danger and, together with her companions, set out on a journey to uncover the full truth behind the cult's plans. They traveled to long-forgotten temples, seeking out the elemental guardians that had remained hidden for centuries. Each guardian represented a different element: earth, water, air, and fire, and their power was said to be older than even the dragons themselves. As Leora and her group ventured deeper into the hidden realms, they encountered old allies and enemies alike. Some of the dragons, including Sereth, had guided them along the way, sharing their wisdom and protecting them from the dangers that lurked in the shadows. But it became clear that the true threat was not only the cult, but the deep-seated imbalance in the world that Eric had tried to remedy. To prevent the cult from gaining control over the elemental forces, Leora and her companions would need to undergo the trial of the elements, a test of their resolve, strength, and unity. The trial was an ancient rite, designed to prove one's worth to the elemental guardians. It was not a trial that could be completed alone, and it would challenge the very core of their beings. Leora, Sereth, and the others journeyed to the first trial site, the Valley of the Earth. It was a land of towering stone cliffs and deep caverns, where the elemental guardians of Earth resided. To prove their worth, they had to navigate through a labyrinth of shifting stones and subterranean chambers, each more treacherous than the last. The earth itself seemed to shift beneath their feet, testing their ability to work together and overcome the obstacles in their path. The trial was not just physical, it was spiritual as well. Leora was faced with visions of her past, moments when she had doubted her path, her purpose, and her ability to lead. She saw herself struggling to make decisions, questioning whether she was the right one to carry Eric's legacy. But as she overcame each vision and challenge, she grew stronger. She realized that her strength did not come from her title or lineage, but from her connection to the world and the people she sought to protect. When they finally emerged from the labyrinth, the guardian of Earth, a massive stone golem with eyes that shimmered like jewels, stood before them. "You have passed the trial," the guardian said, its voice rumbling like the earth itself. "But notice, the true test lies not in your actions, but in the choices you make when faced with impossible odds." With that, the guardian bestowed upon them a shard of the elemental crystal of earth. A powerful artifact that would help protect them from the forces of the void caller. The next trial took them to the crystal waters, a vast and serene ocean that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Here, the guardian of water awaited them, a being of liquid form that flowed like the very tides it commanded. To pass the trial, they would have to prove their ability to navigate the treacherous waters that separated them from the heart of the ocean, where the elemental crystal of water lay hidden. As they sailed across the ocean, they encountered storms of unprecedented ferocity, winds that howled like banshees and waves that rose like mountains. The group was tested not only by the elements, but by their own fears and insecurities. Leora had to confront the doubts that lingered within her. Was she strong enough to lead this journey? Could she truly unite the elements and defeat the rising tide of darkness? In the heart of the storm, when it seemed that all hope was lost, Leora found her answer. She reached out to Sereth and her companions, guiding them through the storm with trust and determination. With each passing wave, the group's bond grew stronger, and they finally reached the island where the Guardian of Water awaited. The Guardian, a beautiful figure of water and light, smiled as they approached. "You have proven yourselves worthy," the Guardian said, her voice like the sound of flowing rivers. "You have learned the strength of unity and the power of trust. Take the elemental crystal of water, and let it guide you in your next trials." With the elemental crystals of earth and water in their possession, Leora and her companions journeyed onward to the trials of air and fire. The trial of air took them high into the sky, where they had to navigate the winds and clouds, seeking the wisdom of the Guardian of Air, a majestic being of wind and sky. The trial of fire took them to a volcano, where they had to withstand the searing heat and molten rivers, facing their deepest fears as they navigated the lava-filled chambers. Each trial tested them in unique ways, pushing their physical and mental limits. But with every step, Leora felt herself becoming more in tune with the elements and with the world itself. She knew that this journey was not just about defeating the cult, but about bringing balance back to the world, ensuring that the legacy of Eric would continue for generations to come. The trials culminated in a final confrontation with the cult at the heart of the Void Caller's former domain. Armed with the elemental crystals, Leora and her companions fought with all their might. The elemental forces, bound by their unity, clashed with the dark magic of the cult, shaking the very foundation of the world. In the end, it was not brute strength that won the day. It was unity, compassion, and the unwavering belief that balance could be restored. As the last remnants of the cult were defeated, the world breathed a sigh of relief, and the guardians of the elements returned to their sacred places. Leora, standing amidst the ruins of the cult's dark temple, looked up to the sky. The world was changing, but it was a change she would help guide. The legacy of Eric had not ended, it had only just begun. With the defeat of the cult and the restoration of balance, the world began to heal. The scars left by the centuries of turmoil were not easily erased, but the presence of the elemental guardians, the dragons, and the united people stood as a testament to what had been achieved. Leora returned to the kingdom with Sereth and her companions, each of them bearing the elemental crystals as symbols of their trials and triumphs. The kingdom welcomed them as heroes, but Leora knew that the true work had only just begun. In the aftermath of the final battle, the elemental forces had settled into the world, their energies now flowing freely in a delicate dance of balance. The dragons returned to their ancient resting places, their power no longer a force of destruction but a beacon of wisdom and strength. The people, once divided, now stood united, no longer simply as subjects of a kingdom, but as guardians of the land and its legacy. But peace was never something that could be taken for granted. The elemental energies had awakened, and with them came new possibilities and new dangers. There were still corners of the world that had remained untouched by the influence of the Guardians, regions, where ancient powers lay dormant, waiting to be discovered. Leora knew that her journey was far from over. Her heart, though filled with the warmth of victory, still longed for adventure. There were still many secrets to uncover, and the fate of the world had yet to be fully written. One such secret lay within the depths of the world, beneath the very foundations of the kingdom. Ancient legends spoke of a realm buried deep beneath the earth, a place where the first creatures of the world had been born. Some believed it to be a myth, while others whispered that it was the source of all magic, the place where the elemental forces had first been harnessed. The time had come for Leora and her companions to explore this forgotten realm. Guided by the wisdom of the dragons and the elemental guardians, they ventured deep into the heart of the earth, descending into a vast network of caverns and tunnels. There, in the stillness of the underground world, they discovered an ancient temple. Its walls covered in intricate carvings that told the story of the world's creation. The temple was said to be the birthplace of the elemental forces, a place where the first guardians had been created. But what they found within the temple was something far more profound. At the heart of the temple lay a crystal, unlike any they had seen before. It pulsed with a power that was both familiar and alien, a force that seemed to bind together the elements themselves. Leora felt a deep connection to the crystal, as if it were calling to her, urging her to uncover its secrets. The discovery of the Crystal of Origins was a turning point in Leora's journey. It was said to be the source of all magic, the very heart of the world's balance. The elemental crystals that had been obtained during the trials were fragments of this greater power, pieces of a puzzle that had yet to be fully understood. But the crystal was not just a source of power, it was a key. A key to unlocking the true potential of the world, to shaping the future and guiding the next age. Its power could be used to protect the world from the forces of chaos, but it could also be used to control and dominate it. Leora, with the wisdom gained from her trials and her deep understanding of balance, knew that the crystal had to be protected. It could not fall into the wrong hands, especially not those who sought to use it for destruction, like the cult that had once threatened the kingdom. But there was another concern that weighed heavily on her heart. The crystal was not meant to be kept hidden forever. The world was changing, and the time was coming when the crystal would need to be shared with others, so that they too could understand its power and use it wisely. As Leora stood before the Crystal of Origins, she felt the weight of the world upon her shoulders. The fate of the kingdom, of the dragons, and of the elemental forces was in her hands. But she knew that she could not face this burden alone. The strength of unity, the lesson that had been passed down from Eric, would guide her in this next step. Leora called upon the children of Unity, those young heroes, who had grown up alongside her, who had trained under the guardians of the elements, and who shared her vision for the future. Together, they would form a council of leaders, one that would guide the world into an era of peace, balance, and shared knowledge. The council would not only consist of humans, but also dragons, guardians of the elements, and even the mysterious beings that had been awakened during their journey. They would come together to ensure that the power of the Crystal of Origins was used wisely, that the elemental forces were respected, and that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. Leora, as the leader of the council, would oversee this new era time where the forces of the world would be in harmony, where the dragons and humans would no longer be separate, but united in their stewardship of the earth. And as she looked out over the land, a sense of peace filled her heart. The world had been shaped by heroes before her, and now it was her turn to guide it forward. But even as she embraced her new role, Leora knew that the story of the Sleeping Mountain, the dragons, and the awakening of the hero was far from over. New challenges would arise, new heroes would emerge, and the adventure would continue, as the legacy of Eric lived on in the hearts of those who had come after him. The world had changed, and with it, the future had been rewritten. The once sleeping mountain, the dragons, and the elemental forces had awakened, not just to protect the world, but to help shape it. And in the years to come, the stories of Eric, of Leora, and the heroes who followed them would be passed down through the generations, ensuring that the legacy of balance, unity, and hope would never be forgotten. As the sun set on a new age, the echoes of the past whispered softly in the wind, a reminder that the journey of the hero never truly ends. It simply continues, unfolding in the hearts of those who dare to dream of a better world. Though peace had settled over the kingdom, a quiet unease lingered in the hearts of those who understood the power that the Crystal of Origins possessed. While Leora's Council of Guardians had taken the reins of governance and stewardship, they were aware that such a power could never truly be guarded by a single group. Its influence would ripple across the land, reaching even the most remote corners of the world. Word of the crystal spread beyond the borders of the kingdom, across distant seas and forgotten lands. Adventurers, scholars, and would-be conquerors sought to uncover its secrets, believing that the power it held could elevate them to godlike status. Rumors of strange occurrences, lightning storms in the middle of clear days, echoes of ancient chants that seemed to be carried on the wind spread across the land. These were signs that the magic of the crystal had begun to stir once more. And so, Leora found herself standing at the edge of an uncertain future, surrounded by the quiet forces of change. The council worked diligently to protect the crystal, ensuring that no one could misuse its power, but they knew that the world was too vast, and its peoples too varied, for any one group to secure it indefinitely. One morning, as Leora stood atop a high tower overlooking the peaceful lands of her kingdom, a familiar presence approached her. Seraph, her closest companion and the ancient dragon who had been by her side throughout their journey. "Leora," he said, his deep voice carrying the weight of centuries. "The winds are changing. There are whispers of ancient creatures awakening beneath the sea, far to the south. And there are those who seek not only the Crystal of Origins, but the forgotten powers that it connects to." Leora's heart sank. Though peace had come, the price of maintaining it would always be vigilance. Serath's warning was not to be taken lightly. It was not long before rumors reached the council of a mysterious force rising from the deep waters of the southern oceans, an ancient kingdom that had long been submerged. It was said that this lost civilization had once been a powerful empire, known for mastering both water and the unknown arts of the stars. The key to their power was believed to be a forgotten artifact, one that had been lost to time but was now stirring beneath the ocean's waves. Leora and her companions, including Serath, set out on an expedition to uncover the truth behind these claims. Their journey took them across vast oceans, through treacherous seas, and into uncharted waters where legends spoke of sea serpents, underwater cities, and the remnants of a civilization that had fallen to the depths long ago. The deeper they sailed into the mysterious waters, the more unsettled they became. The winds grew strange, as if whispering in ancient tongues, and the sea itself seemed to pulse with a rhythm that was foreign and unnerving. But Leora, ever resolute, kept moving forward, determined to protect her people and the balance that had been so hard won. When they arrived at the heart of the deep, they discovered an ancient submerged city, a ruin that seemed to be as old as the world itself. The architecture was alien to them, with towers that rose from the seafloor, like petrified trees, and symbols etched into stone that had not been seen in any history book. In the heart of the city, they uncovered an artifact, an orb of dark crystal, glowing with an eerie light. This orb, they realized, was the source of the ocean's strange currents. It was a creation of the lost civilization, forged to control the powers of the ocean and the stars. But with it came danger. The orb was not merely a tool of power, it was a key to unlocking something far darker. An ancient force that had been sealed away for millennia. The moment Leora touched the orb, the ground beneath them trembled. A deep rumble shook the ocean, and the water around them began to churn violently. From the depths of the sea, a shadow began to rush on. Ancient being, an abomination from the deep, once imprisoned by the forces that created the ocean itself. The creature, known as Asnarok, was the embodiment of the abyss, of primordial force of destruction that had once sought to consume all life. It had been sealed away by the same magic that had kept the balance of the elements in check, but now, with the orb awakened, it was free once more. As the water around them surged, Leora could feel the weight of the responsibility upon her. The Crystal of Origins had been only one part of the ancient power, the orb was another, and it was far more dangerous. In the wrong hands, it could bring about the end of the world. The ancient dragon Sereth stepped forward, his eyes glowing with a fierce determination. "Leora," he said, "this is a battle unlike any we have fought before. The creature you face is not just a being of destruction, it is the very embodiment of the chaos that we fought so hard to contain." Leora nodded, her resolve hardening. The winds of change had not only brought new allies but also new threats. And she would face them, no matter the cost. Asnarok emerged from the depths, a leviathan of darkness and shadow. Its massive form loomed over the waters, a monstrous blend of serpentine and aquatic features, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly fire. The battle that followed was a clash of titanic forces. Sereth, with his immense power, and Leora, with the might of the elemental crystals, fought fiercely against the ancient creature. But Asnarok was unlike any foe they had ever encountered. It wielded the power of the abyss itself, its very presence twisted the fabric of reality around it, making the sea churn in unnatural patterns and causing the elements to lose their harmony. As the battle raged on, Leora realized that the key to defeating the creature was not in brute strength, but in understanding the deeper magic that bound the ocean, the stars, and the elements together. She turned to Sereth, who, though powerful, could not face the creature alone. Together, they began to weave a spell, a binding spell that would draw upon the Crystal of Origins and the elemental forces to seal Asnarok away once more. The ritual was perilous, requiring all their strength and focus, as the very forces of nature began to rebel against their will. But in the end, their unity proved stronger. The spell was cast, and with a final roar, Asnarok was sucked back into the depths, bound once more by the power of the earth, water, air, and fire. With the battle won, Leora and her companions returned to the surface, weary but victorious. The orb was sealed once more, and the knowledge of its power hidden from the world. The kingdom was safe for now. Yet, even as they returned to their lives, Leora could not shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. The winds of change were still blowing, and there were more mysteries to uncover, more challenges to face. The world was vast, and its secrets were endless. As she stood once more before the Crystal of Origins, Leora realized that her path would always be one of balance between light and dark, peace and conflict. The legacy of Eric, and the responsibility of guiding the world, would never be truly hers to carry alone. And so, the story of Leora, Sereth, and the elemental guardians continue at a tale that would echo through the ages, inspiring new heroes to rise and face the challenges of their time. The legacy of Eric lived on, not as a single moment in history, but as a living force that would shape the world for generations to come. The sleeping mountain of dragons, the Crystal of Origins, the dragons, and the elemental guardians, they were all parts of a greater whole. A reminder that the battle for balance would never truly end. The journey of the hero was eternal, ever evolving with the changing tides of time. Though peace had once again settled across the kingdom, Leora knew that nothing was ever permanent. The defeat of Az-Narok had quelled the immediate threat, but the forces that had been awakened in the deep would not be easily silenced. The balance of the world was in a fragile state, and no one could say when the next storm would come. The Council of Guardians, now fully established and stronger than ever, worked tirelessly to maintain order and monitor the movements of potential threats. Yet there was a growing unease among them, as reports came from the farthest corners of the kingdom of strange happenings. Droughts where there should be rain, earthquakes where no fault lines had been charted. It was as if the very fabric of reality was beginning to unravel at the edges. Leora, now more than just a ruler, had become a beacon of hope and strength for her people. But deep inside, she knew that the Crystal of Origins, despite its powers, was not enough to keep the forces of chaos at bay forever. Her thoughts were interrupted one day by the arrival of a mysterious visitor. Cloaked in shadow, a hooded figure entered the throne room, his face obscured by a mask of dark metal. "You have seen the balance shift," the figure said, his voice cold and eerie. "You have felt the world stir beneath your feet. But you are mistaken if you believe this world will ever know true peace." Leora studied him, sensing that he was no mere wanderer. "Who are you?" she demanded. The figure stepped forward, his presence both commanding and unsettling. "I am Darian, the Seeker of the Forgotten Realms. And I have come to warn you, Leora, of a threat older than the mountains themselves. A force that has been waiting in the shadows, biding its time. The true origin of the Crystal of Origins is not what you believe. The power it holds is far greater than you know." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Leora's heart began to race. She had long suspected that the crystal held more secrets than anyone realized. But she had never dared to consider that it might be linked to something far darker than she had imagined. Darian's tale was a chilling one. He spoke of ancient beings, primordial forces who had once ruled the world in an era long before history had been written. These beings, known as the Ancestrals, were said to possess powers that could warp reality itself. But their downfall had come when they sought to control the Crystal of Origins. Instead of mastering its magic, they had become its prisoners, bound to the very earth they had once dominated. The Crystal of Origins, Darian explained, was not a gift from the gods, nor a creation of the elements. It is a remnant of the Ancestrals' attempts to control time itself. What you have been protecting is not just a source of immense power, it is a key. A key to unlocking the forces that were sealed away. Leora felt a wave of unease. The creature, Az-Narok, had been an ancient being tied to these powers, and now Darian was revealing that these forces were far from gone. "Why come to me with this?" she asked. "If these forces are so dangerous, why not fight them yourself?" Darian's eyes flickered with a hint of sadness. "I am bound by my own past, Leora. The Ancestrals sought to erase all who defied them. I was once their servantone of many. But in their arrogance, they failed to account for the forces they unleashed. And now, I am the last of my kind." Leora could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her. There was no denying that Darian's knowledge could be valuable, but the question remained, could she trust him? Despite her hesitation, Leora knew she had little choice but to listen. The world was changing, and the dangers that lay ahead could not be ignored. If the Crystal of Origins was truly the key to something far greater and darker, she had to understand it completely. Darian guided Leora and her companions Sereth, Orindor, and Valinea on a journey to uncover the secrets of the Ancestrals. The path was fraught with peril, taking them into long-forgotten ruins and hidden temples that had been lost to time. Each new discovery deepened the mystery, revealing ancient texts and cryptic inscriptions that hinted at a cataclysmic event in the making. As they traveled, Leora began to understand the full extent of the power that the ancestrals had once wielded. They had not only sought to control time, but also the very essence of life and death. In their quest for eternal dominance, they had broken the natural order, causing a rift in the fabric of reality itself. It became clear that the Crystal of Origins was no ordinary artifact, it was the last remnant of the ancestrals' failed experiment. Its magic was not meant to protect the world but to unravel it. Leora and her companions soon found themselves at the heart of the ancestral ruins, where the final piece of the puzzle lay hidden. It was here, in a vast underground chamber, that they discovered the true nature of the Crystal of Origins. The crystal was not just a source of power, it was a prison that contained the last remnants of the ancestrals' consciousness. These beings, trapped within the crystal, were not dead but waiting for the moment when the world's balance would falter and they could once again rise. As Leora stood before the crystal, the weight of its power pressing upon her, she understood the terrible truth. The very forces that she had been entrusted to protect were the same ones that could bring about the end of the world. If she used the crystal to restore balance, it could awaken the ancestrals, unleashing their destruction once again. Her heart ached with the knowledge that her choices would shape the future. She could destroy the crystal and erase the threat it posed, but in doing so, she would lose the power to protect her kingdom from the other dangers that lurked in the shadows. Seraph, sensing the conflict within her, spoke softly. The power of the ancestrals may be great, but it is not yours to wield, Leora. You are not bound by their past. Your strength lies not in the crystal, but in the choices you make and the people you protect. Leora turned to her companions, their unwavering faith in her a beacon of hope in the darkness. She knew what she had to do. Leora made the difficult decision to seal the crystal away, locking its power once more in a place where no one could reach it. The ancestrals' legacy would remain a dark chapter in the history of the world, but it would not define its future. With the crystal's power contained, Leora returned to her kingdom, where she resumed her role as a ruler and protector. The world was still full of dangers, and the balance remained fragile, but for the first time in a long while, Leora felt the weight of her responsibilities lifted, knowing that she had made the right choice. The story of the sleeping mountain of dragons was far from over, but it was a new Chapter 1 where the hero's journey would continue, not through the manipulation of ancient forces, but through the strength of the heart and the bonds of friendship. And so, the journey of Leora and her companions would live on, their story written in the stars. A tale of courage, sacrifice, and the eternal fight for balance. Today's story ends here. See you later.